Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Happy Monday, preschool peeps.
Happy Monday, everyone. That's our
Welcome
thing.
back to the podcast. It is my thing now.
It's your thing. Yeah, no, we got to do it.
I'm sure it's 1,000 people's things to say Happy Monday.
No, Cindy, it's ours.
It's ours. We're taking it. We're totally
taking it.
So welcome back to, I don't know. I didn't go anywhere. Welcome back.
Either. I'm still here in my house.
I'm still here. I'm still here, but I'm wondering, as we continue to read and hear plans for return to school, and at the same time as we're reading the articles about the basic collapse of the childcare industry in this country, for a variety of reasons. You know, I actually had somebody, Alison, recently say to me, why is it collapsing? I'm like, why is it collapsing? Because they were basically barely financially surviving before, and now they will have,
to begin with,
now they will have less enrollment, need more staff and more equipment, so the math doesn't work.
And there's less tuition coming in.
Correct.
One CDC or whoever your state said you can only have a certain amount of kids. Less kids.
Plus, there are people unemployed.
Yeah.
Right. They don't need the childcare. Plus, there are people who just are not comfortable and have made other sorts of arrangements. I know family childcare people who are turning people away. Yeah. And you know, who knows? I know a couple of people who are actually talking about some sort of nanny share thing. But
I've heard that.
I've heard that a couple
nanny
times.
Share. Like people are trying to pull that together for like after school and stuff like that. Yeah.
So as we're sort of looking at the collapse of what existed, or the potential collapse, maybe it won't, but the potential collapse of what existed, it certainly is going to need to morph and change. And I wonder, here's what Alison and I are wondering on today's episode of the podcast. There was already a movement toward having universal preschool in the public school system in our country, in the United States. And we know that there was that movement because there were things like federal expansion grants. They were called the preschool expansion grants, given out to a number of states to expand free preschool in different areas of the states. And the expansion grants were actually increased in the past year or two from the federal government. We know that where we are, there are more and more public schools every day opening up preschool classes.
Yeah.
And so there's been this slow movement, something that Alison and I actually have been saying for a while, most likely on this podcast, but also personally and at other meetings and things, that, you know, let's face it, that's the path that kindergarten took into our public schools.
Yes.
Right? It was private for people who needed childcare. And then people went, you know, everybody should have access to this kindergarten thing. And it's really good for kids. And we want to make sure everybody has access. So let's put it in as part of the public schools, but we'll charge a tuition for it. And in some states, and ours, I think, may still be included, kindergarten is still not even a required grade, even though we expect our public schools to have it.
Yeah, kindergarten is not required in this state.
It just became part of it. And so Alison and I are like, I wonder, will this COVID crisis, which is causing all this rethinking of what to do and crazy schedules, accelerate or propel that movement toward putting at least 3 and 4-year-olds, if not younger, in a public school system, including them in the system that the older children are in, through funding and space and all that stuff, is what was happening anyway going to be sped up, was basically my question.
Yeah.
And I think there are a variety of reasons why it could speed up, not the least of which are these two. First, the funding into the public schools through federal dollars. Like, I know that there's a lack of money right now. And I know that the national and state budgets have been severely impacted by this pandemic, and that the government is going to need to prioritize where does the money go, both on the federal and state level. And maybe actually one of those priorities is going to be childcare, that's where it has to go, because look what happened. And that was no good. And the system has collapsed. So now there isn't available childcare for everyone who needs it. So we're going to have to figure out a way to attach that to our public school system. It may be kind of a natural flow. And so they might have to prioritize the dollars. And let's not forget that education for our youngest citizens or youngest children, don't even really necessarily have to be citizens, but for our youngest children, is always a bipartisan issue. It's not, both parties in our country agree about the value of an early childhood education. That's why you get expansion grant money. So will they be funneling even more money to expand universal preschool because people need the childcare? And the second point I was going to make about that, Alison, is along the same lines. People need the childcare, and people need childcare that has a schedule that kind of now is going to be sort of the same as when they have older children. If the public schools are doing a hybrid model, for example, of education over the next year at least, right? Let's say that's going to happen. If you have a young child in childcare 5 days a week all day, but your elementary school age child, your school age child is only going 2 days a week, and then 3 days a week is virtual or something like that, then what good is that 5 day a week childcare? Because you still can't work the way you were like that, or you still need childcare for your elementary school child. You might as well put them together. So if those children, if the siblings were on the same schedule, it actually would help families to organize what they need to do. And in fact, local community organizations could be enlisted and to pitch in, and local governments could pitch in for childcare on the other days. They were talking about doing that in New York City. I don't know if you saw Mayor de Blasio talking about it. They are going to ensure, he said they're ensuring that all children under a certain age, I forget the age, I could be wrong here, nobody quote me, could be like 13, under the age of 13, will be provided with childcare on the days that they have to be virtual. So they're reaching into their community centers and businesses and all sorts of things to open up space that's now not being used.
I did hear this, I don't think it was New York City though. I think it was somewhere else across the country, like maybe in the Midwest or I don't quote me. I have no idea. Okay. Was that it was almost like flipped. They were going to do remote learning. Okay. But if you are a parent and you need to work and you need your child to be watched while they are doing remote learning, you now could go to the public school and use those rooms socially distanced, and there will be like a room monitor there to watch and make sure that your child is still doing their remote learning and to troubleshoot if there's tech problems and things like that. And I thought, I'm like, wow, that's a very interesting model. So then all that the school would have to pay for is that aid or that room monitor. And then all the teachers would be remote teaching, but if you need a childcare, it's still provided. You still have it. It was like kind of like flipped it. It's like backwards of what you would think. Instead of sending all the kids into the building to go to school, make the building like a remote learning hub kind of
Interesting.
Thing. Yeah, so they were still providing childcare. I really wish I remembered where that was.
I wonder if they'll attach childcare for like 3 and 4 year olds, or I don't know. I feel like a path that we were already on that potentially could have helped so many families that may be looked at now, and they may say, you know what, that path we were on needs to speed up. And I actually was reading on social media, which on every episode of this podcast, we remind me that's a mistake. But I was reading comments.
I need to get off of it. I really do. But
it's terrible.
I also learned some good things on social media.
Too.
Like that plan I just told you about. I thought that was fascinating. But what I need to not do is click the comments and be like, I need to just comments read. Can be. Yeah, that's the issue. But
I have read some interesting comments, and I've actually responded to some to alleviate people's fears and to
there's a lot of fear going on.
demystify and demyth things that they are saying. Unmyth, take the myths away. I don't know.
Yeah.
So here's one
myth busting.
Myth busting again.
We used to have myth busting episodes.
We did back in the day.
Maybe we'll get back to those one day when COVID is like,
perhaps, who knows?
Who knows?
So I actually felt the need to bust the myth that public schools do not have developmentally appropriate preschool. That's simply not true. And
it really bothers me when people really do think that still. Yeah.
It's not true. It's preschools in public schools, the majority do use developmentally appropriate formal pieces of curriculum that ensure that the young children are learning in the ways they learn best, which is interactive and hands-on and through play. So there are some really phenomenal pieces of curriculum. And whenever I say this, people contact us to say, which curriculums are you talking about?
Ones? What are you talking about?
we are not endorsing any, and they don't endorse us. I'm just going to give you the examples that you could Google and find they're the most popular. The most popular ones being used right now include, but are not limited to, the creative curriculum, high scope, tools of the mind.
There's another one.
There is another one. We're leaving one out.
There's another one.
Well, if we think of it, we'll
think of it.
We'll add it. And one of the reasons that those are the most popular and being so widely used is because in many places, including our state where we live, if you are part of the preschool expansion grant money, if you've taken that money, or if you want to make sure that the quality of your early education system is really good in your public school, you have to be part of the quality rating and improvement system that's in the states. And your state, if you're listening to me, your quality rating and improvement system likely says that. So it's a star system. You earn stars based on your quality, and you're rated using valid and reliable tools. And it says right in there, if you want to get a decent number of stars, you have to use a research-based curriculum. So public schools do, vast majority, use research-based curriculums or base their school system on well-known educational philosophies like Reggio Emilia or Montessori or something like that. This whole notion that, oh no, we can't open up 3- and 4-year-old classrooms in a public school because that will be no good because it won't be developmentally appropriate is simply not the case. So I want everybody to and families, you can insist, you can go and say, I insist to your Board of Education that you use a developmentally appropriate curriculum.
Right. Well, I think people have this image, like they think of public school and they think like, oh, it's just rows of desks and all this, and they think like, oh, well, why would I want my preschooler in rows of desks? And I'm here to tell you that's not the way it goes. Like even in the older grades, at least at my school, they have desks, but they also have lots of other areas that they can gather to do their curriculum. It's not like they're confined to this desk. So like it's very much like walking into a private preschool when you walk into these preschool rooms in a public school. It is not rows of desks. It's play-based learning. It's not like, get that image out of your head when you think of public school.
And let us not forget, if the children are in public school, then there are things that actually benefit people who are qualified to teach early education. There's the salary, the benefits, the things that people keep complaining that early childhood educators don't get paid enough, which is 100% true, but they fare better in a public school if they're qualified. Plus, the public schools dictate that you have to have an education degree in early childhood education, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting qualified people, and the public schools are better able to pay them.
Yeah.
Intrinsically, because of the sort of system that we are in, the capitalist system that we're in, intrinsically there are issues with the mixture sometimes of business and education, because it becomes about profit. If it's a for-profit place, I'm talking about for-profit places right now, it becomes about profit, and that's tricky. Nonprofits are always struggling to balance their budget. That's tricky.
That's true.
There's just financially less tricky things about
Yeah.
preschool offerings attached to public schools. Now, some people choose private? Sure.
Oh, of course. And
Just
that's
like
their
they choose
right.
private
Yeah.
elementary, middle, and high school.
Yeah, that's their right.
Sure.
They can do that. They can
So could private still exist? Yes.
Yeah, and it should.
But absolutely. There should be choice.
There should be choice. Yeah.
But that movement that's been happening
Yeah.
toward, let's all recognize the importance of the early childhood years and make it part of the public school system universally for everyone, so that everyone has equal opportunity to have a high quality early childhood education. I'm just saying that may be propelled by COVID-19. So
Yeah.
how do you feel about that, Allison, as someone who works in a public school preschool?
I'm like all for that. I mean, I see
about the acceleration. Do you think it still needs the time it was going to take, or do you think the acceleration is a good thing?
I think the acceleration may be a good thing for everyone all around. I think like you were just saying, I know the benefits of being a teacher in a public school, which did increase my salary and did give me great benefits and gave me a bigger budget to work with a little bit in buying supplies for my classroom, so I feel like I can provide for the children a little bit, sometimes more than what a private preschool, which might be scraping for money to buy things, so I think there's a lot of advantages to it. I think it should expand. Like, why are we waiting? If we know that this is what we want to do, why are we waiting on it? Like, we know it works. We know that, New York City has done it. There's other states that have done it. Let's just do it everywhere.
New York City, they have an interesting model, because I work with some schools that have UPK, Universal Pre-K, and Universal, their 3K program, which is their 3-year-old program that is, funded through the public schools. It's an interesting model in the city. Yeah. The schools that I work with are actually private settings who have been approved to work with the public schools to take in universal pre-K classrooms and 3K classrooms.
Yeah.
And so they work cooperatively with the public school system in the districts that they're in.
Yeah.
The districts, it depends on where they are, how much they dictate to the schools, what about curriculum and all that stuff. But there is a cooperative model in New York City where the private centers who are high quality, who keep striving toward high quality, can be approved to house the universal pre-K students. Different than that sort of proposition in other states, how they do it in the city. I think the city is a decent model for people to look at and go, could that work here?
Right. Like, I know, like, I used to live in West Virginia. In West Virginia, and I don't know if it's still like this, because we're talking like I lived there years ago, but years ago when I lived there, pre-K 4 was universal, but instead of building additions onto their public schools, which they could not afford, they would go to a center. They would go to like a highly rated center that would have the space and the, capability, rent that room from the center. So the center was getting money from the public school to rent that room. The teacher that was in that room was a public school employee, but the children went to that preschool. That site, but they were public school students, and then if they needed before and after care, they would just go to the childcare rooms for that after that. So I don't know if that's what New York City, I think what New York City is doing is more cooperative, maybe, instead of like, whereas like in West Virginia, it was very like, this room is all like it was kind of odd when you would walk through the centers, you'd be like, okay, you could tell the public school rooms because they were totally furnished differently and they had different supplies and all that stuff. Like it's
a little different. More in the city. It's a little more of no, it's different than that. It's a little more of, your top quality, what you're doing. So we're going to send our students to you.
Okay.
That's more what it's like. Right.
Right.
And
so
like,
they're
like
not the opposite.
They're actually, it is.
Yeah.
And they're not actually necessarily employees of the public school, the teachers.
Right.
They are employees of their private setting, but they teach universal students.
Yeah.
And they do have to have certain qualifications to teach, which I know that's a tough kind of a tough nut to crack, because
That
for so
is
long
tough.
in early childcare, the same sort of qualifications of having a degree and a teaching certification did not exist. When they had in our state, when they developed Abbott districts, which were the most at-need districts, it was a law. The Abbott comes from the name of a ruling in the courts, that it has to be offered, preschool has to be offered to certain students, and there has to be certain funding or whatever. So the Abbott districts had a period of time during which they offered scholarships to staff who were not certified teachers to go back to school, get their certification. There was like this period of time where they were like, okay, we will fund your education should you want to stay with this. I think that the governments need to, if we start to accelerate the path to universal pre-K, they need to consider offering some pathway for people who are currently working in it to become, certified, to get the education, to become certified. And I think that those people who opt out of that, it should just be an option. It's your choice. They maybe could become, I don't know, paraprofessional aides or something if they're great for that. Who knows? But I think that there needs to be consideration for the fact that we need to offer people the ability to get the education that they would need to be part of a publicly funded system.
Yeah.
And I think, so there would be a transition period. It's interesting. I said one time to a family member of mine, I said, boy, some of these, if they go to public preschool, some of the jobs that exist right now in the childcare sector might become obsolete, right? Might disappear, might become obsolete. And my relative reminded me that I had a relative who years ago worked in the printing industry when they used to actually take the letters and put them in
the thing,
the metal letters, and put them in the thing. And he retired because that job was becoming obsolete. And it really is just the evolution of society.
It really is.
We all have the potential that it's going to evolve past us.
Yeah.
But there are also people who might decide, I don't want my children in that sort of setting, so I am going to hire somebody who's worked in childcare setting to watch this group of kids in our neighborhood, or we're going to have community centers that do that. Or it doesn't mean, it may mean the setting that you know right now will be different, but it doesn't mean all work for you might necessarily disappear. I think that we have to be open to the possibility that COVID-19 has shown us what doesn't work. What
doesn't work and what needs to change, what needs to evolve. It might not even be changing. It might just be, it's an evolving system. It just needs to evolve with the times. The times have changed because we had COVID happen.
Boy, have the times changed.
We need to move with it.
At warp speed. Here's what happened to me.
Gosh.
On March 13th, everything about my life changed. It's
so weird.
Hit a hard stop.
We can pin. It's not.
Oh, there goes my light. You see that?
Yeah, I see that now. It's so weird that we can pinpoint the exact day of things that happened because we had this crisis happen, and we know it's like, I know my last day of school was March 13th. Normally, when your life evolves, you're like, oh yeah, over time this happened. But for us, it was like, ooh, March 13th happened. Everything's different, And then the difference is they're kind of evolved a little bit of okay, so school's closed for 2 weeks, and then okay, school's closed for another month, and okay, we're not going back.
Okay, Cindy, from now on you're going to work right here in this.
Here's your box.
Thanks. You better set up an office space, Cindy, because you're going nowhere. We did evolve to that acceptance.
And there's jobs that are being created because of this COVID crisis.
That's true.
There are schools, preschools, and maybe even public schools, I'm not really sure, that are hiring distance learning teachers, or coordinators to coordinate the distance learning, so there's some jobs out there that people who are teachers who are really good at tech, I'm not, but
I'm the techie on the podcast.
You could get one of these jobs then that knows, that could be a totally different world for you, and you might actually really enjoy it if you're a teacher that loves tech and can do all that and handle all that. And
I teach.
There's things that are different. It's evolving.
I'm an associate faculty member of an online university. I do it totally online.
Yeah, so there you
and
go.
I think this is one of those things where it's kind of like March 13th, where boom, the childcare needs and industry has changed. Now let's evolve over the next several months to kind of everybody accept that, and then let's figure out what life is going to be.
Yeah, but I also think like because the childcare world is in the state that it's in, and it's rapidly
not good,
eroding,
folks.
that we need to figure out this plan quick, because what happens if one day all of them just are closed and these parents have nowhere to put their children when they need to work? So you want to boost the economy, but you can't because these people can't go to work because there's no childcare.
Right.
So, and that's going to happen very, very quickly. We're not talking years, we're talking months.
You know, here's what, maybe it'll look like this. Maybe for a while, anyway, the infants and toddlers will go to childcare, and then the children who are in publicly funded early childhood programs will be using those buildings for the wraparound of before and after care only.
Yeah.
Who knows? We don't know where this is going to evolve, but I do think that our outlook on what needs to be available universally for families, not just those who can afford to do whatever and hire whoever, universally, we need to have a system that not only provides childcare for our earliest learners, but also provides a high quality education. And COVID-19 has shown us that. I was reading an article about how more privileged families are simply opting not to work or to hire nannies and stuff. And that's great, but this has to be available universally. And I think that right now people are looking around going, oh, wait, we need to address this. And they just haven't quite figured out why. Because why haven't they figured out, Alison? Because they should be listening to this podcast.
They absolutely should.
Hello. We're right here. We're full of ideas. So at any rate, we're running long again. Let's just leave
great
this.
Ideas, I'm sure.
I know we have some. So
we have some wacky ones.
We do. Some of them are whacked out, but some of them are really good.
But even though they're whacked out, they might work. You never know. Sometimes
I read about
things
a community.
have happened over wacky things. Yeah.
I read about a community putting together the sorts of pods we've talked about on prior episodes, and I went, dang, look at that. And it wasn't because of us. It was just we saw it coming, that people would have to do that.
We just have that foresight. Is that the right thing? Yeah, we're just
something. I don't know what we
predictor.
We're predictors. Great predictor of the future. They could put us in some sort of arcade, and we could predict it. So on that note, as we circle the drain of whatever we're talking about here, we're gonna sign off, and we're gonna remind people that we have 100th episode coming eventually. And so please send your questions to us. Reach us at howpreschoolteachersdoit.com or our Facebook. Mm-hmm. Allison, last episode I said you were doing this closing.
I was like, cha-ching, I got out of that.
So
you're just so good
you didn't
at
get
it.
out of that. You didn't get out of that.
So good at it, though.
Stop it. Say goodbye to the people. You're closing. Tell them what we want.
All right, we want 5 stars. Please rate us 5 stars because we're awesome. That's number 1. Number 2, please send us your questions for our 100th episode, Ask Us Anything, which is coming up soon, I think.
I don't know. I have to look at the calendar.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But that gives you a little bit of time to figure out what your questions are. So
we're on 80-something, the upper 80s of episodes.
So 20 more weeks. You have 20 weeks to figure out what your questions are.
Oh my goodness.
But also, if you just have a general question about, what we talked about today, you can find us on Facebook, How Preschool Teachers Do It podcast, or our website, howpreschoolteachersdoit.com. Did I do everything?
I think
I'm getting so much better.
Catch you next time on the podcast, Preschool Peeps. Take care. Stay safe.
Yeah, bye-bye.